My guest for today was my elementary classmate, Ramon Joffrey, or RG Evangelista. So we catch up, make up for lost time, and we delve into different topics. He spent some time working in Japan, many insights also. Perhaps something you'd like to add?
Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's video. I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy to see Mike again after such a long time, and I'm just really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have from this moment on.
Yeah, so I hope you take something from this dialogue. Thank you. Morning, RG.
Good morning, Mike.
Yeah,
How are you?
Good. It's good to see you after such a long time. Well, quite a while.
It has been.
Yeah, so we finally get to do this. So, kumusta so far? How have you been?
Well, life has been good so far. I just recently came back from living in Japan. So it did take some time to readjust back to the life here in Cebu, but I'm doing okay.
Doing okay. So now, how's your dating life? Let's go straight to that.
Wow. Well, right now I am seeing someone. For the longest time, I wasn't. When I was there in Japan, I also was dating a Japanese as well. But right now that I'm back here, I'm also trying out my luck once more. Fingers crossed, she's the one.
But I think these days it's difficult to find a suitable partner.
It is.
Because if you notice, people tend to be more materialistic now, more expedient. But it's good to be practical. But
it is.
Sometimes you need to look for that sincere person, like who truly gets you, or who's there for the right reasons, right?
Right.
So I hope you have luck in exploring.
I mean, I hope the person I'm seeing now will just be the same as your wife, and I hope we have that sort of compatibility.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, setting up a family.
Right.
That's not an easy task, but of course that's the higher path in a sense, where you take on more responsibility, where you become empowered, and of course look out for children, if should you have one.
Yeah.
So I understand you had some time working in Japan. What was that experience like?
So for me, when I went to Japan, that was basically 11 years of my life there. And I first recently got that opportunity because when I was about to graduate in college, I decided to take this Global Sayosha program. It's a global recruit program for this company, Toshiba. And then I just decided to try it out, and as luck would have it, I reached all the way till the final interview. And then I just decided to see how it would go. And that was where I was able to get my foot in to Japan.
So when you first worked in Japan, was it a big leap in terms of adjusting to the culture, the people? Because I know it's very fast-paced there compared to life in Cebu, which is more laid back and more chill.
Right.
So was it a big leap?
Well, I think for me, it wasn't as much of a big leap as other people would have it be, because when I was studying in college, I was studying in Manila. So during that time, I already had to live by myself. And I guess living by myself gave me that sort of experience to kind of be a little bit more independent. But of course, there are still other things that you have to try to get used to when you're in a new country, especially since you wouldn't have a support system. And let's say if some bad things happen, you have to learn to really take care of it without somebody being able to come in within 1 hour or within a couple of minutes. But I think from that aspect, it was okay. From the work aspect, as you were mentioning, right? Work culture, there's overtime, there's things like that. But I guess for me, it was just lucky also that I had that job in Japan as my first job, working outside as a fresh grad. And so because it was my first job, I suppose I didn't exactly have a measure of comparison against, what jobs are in other countries or what jobs are in other places. And so I took it as perfectly normal, I suppose.
How satisfied were you with the company you worked in?
I mean, very satisfied. With my first company, Toshiba, honestly speaking, if they didn't give me that opportunity, then I would never really have thought about going to Japan because I didn't know the language, I didn't know the culture. And so what they really did was they tried to cultivate me. They tried to give me all the necessary trainings. And it's thanks to them that I was able to be adjusted to the life there and just have a life moving forward.
What about in terms of standard of living, cost of living? You mentioned independent life, so of course you had to rent.
Yes.
You had to pay for your groceries, of
Yes.
course.
Yes.
All the expenses.
Yeah.
Maybe you can walk us through your usual routine and your monthly budget.
Right,
and
right.
so forth. Maybe as a guide if ever someone out there might want to embark in a similar journey.
In that journey. I mean, to be honest, for me, I think learning how to manage my expenses was really a work in progress, because there would be times where I would say that I'd want to save up, let's say 50% of my salary, but because of temptations, because of wanting to eat good food, because of wanting to travel, because of wanting to do things like that, it always ends up below what I had initially planned for. So throughout the years, what I tried to do was I tried to find ways to really make the most accurate and the best possible kind of estimate for my budget. And with me, the situation was that I was always sending remittance to my family back here in Cebu. So that was basically like 50% of the salary that I would get. And for the remaining 50%, what I would try to do is I tried to have 25% be allotted for the living expenses, and then the other 20% basically for the food, and the remaining 5% would be for things, savings or enjoyment, if you will. So during that time, as you said, Mike, I did realize that I was kind of living from paycheck to paycheck, in the sense that I wouldn't really have savings, in the sense that I would send 50% of the money back home for my parents to use. But later on, as I got more used to the life there, and I learned that I could be able to save more on my food expenses by cooking, I could be able to save more in terms of the living expenses by transferring to a condo that is a little bit far from the city. And so thanks to that, that was where I got to start saving up a little bit.
How long did it take for you to fully adjust in Japan? I know you had to learn the language. In fact, now you're an interpreter and you teach Japanese. How long did it take to fully adjust?
Well, for me, honestly speaking, there was actually a clause or a condition that Toshiba gave to its global recruits, where in the first year of transferring to Japan, I would have to take this exam called a JLPT. It means Japanese Language Proficiency Test. And there are different levels in that JLPT. N5 is the lowest, N1 is the highest. So their expectation was, after 1 year of us training you, of us letting you work here and work in an actual office, you would take the N2, which is the second level to the highest, and then you need to pass. So I think that was the huge pressure test, if you will, that sort of enabled me to adjust to the language within 1 year. But of course, right after that exam had finished, I still needed to master speaking on a more negotiation type of level, to really try to make use of the language, not just from a textbook perspective, but also on how to close deals or on how to get the customer to say yes. And so I think that took a little bit longer, say for instance, another 2 years. And then eventually, after a couple of years passed, I decided to take the highest level of certification, which was the N1, and luckily I passed. So I guess that was the language journey for me as well.
But delving into the earlier roots, was this always something you wanted to do? Because what was your course when in college?
My course was Management Information Systems. So that was basically half of programming and half of management. So for me, honestly speaking, I never really had the mindset or the goal to work in Japan for the first part, and secondly, for the job there, which was supply chain management. And for me, in my life back then, it was either I was going to be a programmer to follow in the footsteps of my course, or I would be a, well, pilot, a commercial pilot, since that was also the dream of my father, who unfortunately couldn't materialize it.
Did you go through flying lessons?
I tried to apply for a scholarship. I believe Philippine Airlines and Cebu Pacific still offer that kind of thing where you study now and pay later to them. And so what happens is you study with them, and then after you graduate, you get immediately employed in their company as a pilot, as a first officer. And from there, you work your way to paying the debt, and eventually you become a full-fledged employee there. And so I tried to apply for it. I was given the opportunity to be able to enter into a scholarship, but during that time, that was also when the Toshiba opportunity came out. So after weighing my options and thinking, do I continue to study, or do I start working, earning money, and supporting my family? And that's where the decision came that I should just probably start working, because I wanted to become useful or relevant to help my family out.
How supportive were your parents with the leap to Japan?
I mean, honestly speaking, they were very supportive. And of course, being the only son, it was a little bit difficult for my mom especially.
Because you're an only child, diba? And
Yes.
they're getting old also, so maybe
Exactly.
there's that sentiment.
Exactly. And of course, as parents, and I'm sure since you're a parent right now, you can relate, there are always, I suppose, certain worries that a parent might have for his child, especially if they're okay, they're eating right, are they healthy, are they being the best that they can be there. And I think for my mom, as well as my dad, that was one of the things that really weighed in their minds. But eventually, after a couple of years passed, they grew to accept the situation, and that's how I suppose I was able to live there for so long.
So both of them were in full support early on.
Yeah, they were on board. Of course, they would check in from time to time.
So they flew to you and they paid you visits?
They have. We always try to have a tradition where once a year, either they would fly to Japan or I would fly back here just to check in on them, see how they were doing. And I think that it was through those sort of visits, as well as through phone calls or Skype calls, that we sort of established a rapport of them not having to worry, and just being all right with the whole situation.
So your time in Japan, you worked for how many companies?
So Toshiba was my first company, and then I followed up with a company, Johnson& Johnson. So that was a subsidiary there in Tokyo, and I was working under medical devices. So the one touch for diabetes, basically cardiovascular items, I would be in charge of handling the supply chain for that. And then I went to Bosch, which is eye care, contact lenses, eye care solutions, and then my last one was with Shiseido, the cosmetics company.
Okay, so 4 different companies.
Yes.
And you had different roles for each of this company.
That's a good question.
How different was your role in each company?
So actually, when you talk about roles in the company, all of it was essentially still supply chain management. But I suppose the difference came to what I was managing specifically in terms of first the products as well as the perspective or point of view where I was at. Meaning to say, for example, in Toshiba, because I was employed in headquarters, I was in charge of looking at the entire supply chain and looking at the perspective of us managing all the different subsidiaries across the world. Now, when I went to Johnson & Johnson, because it is a subsidiary, the style changed because instead of handling PCs, it was about handling medical devices. And aside from that, because it was a subsidiary, we were looking at Japan only in particular. So aside from that, when I went to Bosch, again, that was a subsidiary of the US company. So during that time, it was purely Japan. And I was handling eye care solutions, contact lenses. And finally, again, with Shiseido, it went back to the style in Toshiba where we were managing cosmetics, but that was more of looking at it from a macro perspective again, global.
So I imagine you must have learned a lot from these 4 companies.
I am deeply grateful, yes. Toshiba gave me the opportunity to learn the language and, of course, real world experience about getting my hands dirty with really talking to suppliers, talking to distributors, and of course to the subsidiaries themselves. With Bosch, Johnson & Johnson, and Shiseido, they also gave me that opportunity to really see how I could be able to further expand the things that I already knew and the experiences that I had. So, truly.
So what were some positive learnings you got and some disappointments? Your best times and worst times during your whole time working in Japan?
I mean, that's a good question. I, honestly speaking, for the most part, really enjoyed my stay in Japan because, again, I just felt that everyone, that was my colleagues, the community that I was with there, they were very supportive to really let me adjust to the lifestyle there and give me or cut me some slack when I needed it. But of course, there are disappointments or there are times where it becomes really hard. And for me, especially in the first few years of my living there, one of the most difficult things for me was to really get my message across to the person I was talking to, especially since for us, speaking in English or speaking in Tagalog or Bisaya is so much easier compared to speaking, let's say, Chinese or compared to speaking, let's say, Japanese. So there would be things that I would like to say, but I always get stunted or I always stop myself because I don't really know how to say it in a proper way or in the right way. And so in the end, I blurt out something that is like what a preschooler or what a grade schooler would say. And for me, it's frustrating because we can think already in a way that is of a professional level, but for us to have to lower ourselves just to match with the language is, again, truly one of the things that really made me frustrated. But I guess it was also because of this frustration that I would try to build myself up, really force myself to learn the language every day through language exchange, through talking with people in a coffee shop, and really just forcing myself to get to the point where in my brain I do not need to convert the English into Japanese, and Japanese just flows out.
So you had to work through that barrier, that gap,
Yes.
culturally,
Yes.
language-wise.
It was a challenge, but again, everyone was supportive in that aspect. The other sort of frustration that I did have, aside from the language in the beginning, was when it came to the topic of age and seniority.
So you were deemed as too young, or
Well, the thing about the
Something.
situation was that since in the Philippines, we have a different style of education compared to Japan or other countries, right? Until recently, we used to have it grade school, high school, college. And so it wouldn't be uncommon for graduates in the Philippines to be 20 years old, 21 years old. And for me, I graduated at 20 years old, and I went into my first company in Japan. But in the case of Japan, because they have a middle school, that's why a lot of the people that graduate as fresh grads are already at the age of 22, 23, 24. And so, of course, having that sort of disparity, as well as having to deal with people or my managers or senior managers that were 50, 60, maybe sometimes even 65, it was hard in the beginning to really try to get my point across when they would try to look at me in the perspective of me being not yet mature, or not yet having that enough experience
so there's that extra challenge
yes, to back up my
because
claim.
of their perceptions of you.
Yes. And I think that that was one of the things, along with the language, that I had to really work on. So that eventually helped my work style develop into,
Yeah, you had to really combat that, work against the current,
Right.
you would say.
exactly.
Okay, but you worked with 4 different companies,
Mhm.
so I imagine
Yes.
that's different company cultures. But of course, Japanese companies.
Yes.
How would you differentiate the varying company cultures? Because of course, each company has their own, how they run things,
Right.
different personalities, different characters.
Right.
So, how would you compare and differentiate?
I mean, there are a lot of quirks per se when you go to a certain company. But I guess when you talk about Japan, you can really drill it down to 2 different types. So we have what is gaisuke, and we have something that is called nikke. So gaisuke basically means foreign, because of the word gai, which means out. And we have something that is nikke, which comes from the character ni, which means Nihon, Japan. And so that is Japan related. Now, when I was in Toshiba, when I was in Shiseido, we can say that that is a Nikkei company. And with Gaisuke, that was my stint at Johnson & Johnson and Bosch Lomb. And I think the main differences between those 2 types of companies is that when you talk about a Nikkei company, generally speaking, we're talking about literally the Japanese type of company. And of course, it comes with the perceptions of what we assume a Japanese company to be. So, of course, there would tend to be more overtime. There would tend to be more collaboration, more teamwork sort of effort to trying to achieve something. And at the same time as well, it was very, there was a lot of emphasis on seniority and of really being able to go up the corporate ladder together with your boss, who would also go up the corporate ladder. I think that was the main sort of quirks, or the main sort of thing with Nikkei. But when you have Gaisuke, it's a little bit different, because Gaisuke is sort of more focused on performance. And so in that aspect of performance, as long as you do your job, regardless if you finish at 4 p.m. or you finish at 12 a.m., it really doesn't matter, as long as you can be able to deliver the work. Now, the challenge though is that Gaisuke is basically, usually with companies that have a limited staff. Because again, we're talking subsidiary. So because it's a subsidiary, the issue there is that you might have one person doing the role of 5 people. And that's why, even though there's no necessity to do overtime, you have to do overtime. But I suppose the difference there was that in Gaishke, you focus on yourself and your own performance. And with Nikkei, it was more collaborative.
Team.
Yeah, you support one another.
What about in terms of pressure? Because I know Japanese are very efficient. Well, ideally, how they run things, there's that perception that
Yes.
they're very numbers driven, very work oriented in a sense that they really get things done
Right.
properly.
Right.
What's your take on
I think-
pressures? And also work-life balance in terms of socials. Are you able to socialize with your workmates, or was it purely just the work? Or
Well, first of all, to your first question regarding the efficiencies and things like that, I really appreciated the fact that they love to work. And I think that that is something that we as Filipinos as well should really try to emulate, because at the end of the day, when there is work and when we find the joy in doing work, then life becomes so much easier. As they say, when you love your work, then everything else will follow. And so for me, I think that that was one of the things that really motivated me to do my best every day. In terms of their belief system that things had to be very numbers driven, things had to be very accurate in that aspect, it's actually interesting that you mentioned that, because I think one of the things that I realized in Japan was that it's more about the journey toward finding, let's say, the answer or the result of the project rather than the actual result itself. That was one of my learnings.
the journey, not the destination?
Exactly. And what I'm trying to say with this is that, let's say, for instance, you're supposed to deliver a report, okay? Deliver a report about the viability of creating a building in that area. And normally speaking, let's say if it was another company or if it was another country, the goal would be just to be able to have the building there. And if the building is done, if it's done with the construction and everything, it's up and running, that's good. You've done a good job. But in Japan, of course, the result itself is important, but the journey or the research that is done in order to reach to that point is also equally as important. So you need to do this type of thing. You need to basically do an advanced consultation with this kind of person. And in Japan, there's actually a very important concept that they call as horenso. So horenso, the Japanese word for horenso actually means spinach, but horenso is an acronym that the Japanese use to indicate 3 things. There is hokoku, rennaku, and sodan. So hokoku means report, rennaku is to communicate, and sodan is to consult. And all these things need to be done prior to delivering that actual result. So again, there's a lot of emphasis on the journey. And so I think that for me, that was also something that I had to get used to, because, and I think you can also attest to this, before I wasn't really as extroverted per se. I was more introverted, similar to you, that, as long as everything's okay, I just keep to myself. But there, because of the circumstances, you really have to go out of your shell to do something more. And so that...
Yeah, I've been meaning to ask you, how was your social life in Japan? Because I know you embarked on that alone.
Yes.
So I guess you didn't know anyone in Japan. So how did you mingle? And I asked earlier about workmates. Did you have socials outside of work? Did you talk about other things?
So that's actually a mixed bag, in the sense that, to begin with, yes, it was true that I went to Japan alone. But during that time when I entered into Toshiba, because it was a global recruit program, I had the opportunity to be friends with people from Singapore, from Taiwan, from Europe, from America, Thailand.
So different cultures, different types of people, different races.
Yes, and although we were few, I also was able to be with some other Filipinos who became my best friends as well in our batch of accepted applicants for the role.
So this is same age group, same
Sort-
generation,
sort
close.
of, yeah,
like
like,
5-year gap or close.
2-3 year gap.
Also quite close.
And with these people, for me, I was studying in Ateneo back then, and these friends of mine from the Philippines, they came from UP, Diliman. We had different courses, so of course we also had different jobs that were provided to us. But when we embarked on the training together, we experienced everything together. And so I think that it was thanks to that shared experience that I got to build a bond, a friendship with, of course, my fellow Filipinos and also my foreign community. And I think that's how my life of adjustment started out. Now, moving forward, of course, after the training is done and when you're in the actual workplace doing an actual job, things change because your schedules change. They can be working at this time and you'd be done working. So, of course, it was more difficult to get the chance to hang out and really socialize. So I think it moved on to the next question that you're probably asking. Were you able to socialize with Japanese despite the work, despite the overtime? And believe it or not, Japanese like to party as well.
Yeah, I've had experiences since I deal with a lot of Japanese executives also.
Right.
So yes, they do. They have that side. Like
Exactly.
in the work area, it's very rigid.
Yes.
But once they're out, they're more loose. They let it out, I guess, to distress.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, there's a very interesting concept as well in Japan. So we call the party as a nomikai. So nomi is from the word nomimas, which is to drink, and kai is party. So drinking party, literally. And so what happens here is that sometimes people go to nomikai, aside from socializing and getting closer to your boss in a more private sort of manner, is there is again another concept called nomunication, which is again from the word nomu, which is to drink, and nication, which is communication, which is to speak. So I have some of my colleagues tell me before that, you know, Ramon, RG, if you wanna get your boss's approval for something, you might as well try to ask your boss while you're drinking. Probably the approval phase might actually be quicker.
Yeah, that's an occurrence also in my field. Drinking really somewhat adds to the lubrication in a
Yes.
way, social lubricant.
Yeah.
In a way where you're more loose, then you can, it's not very structured in a way, then you're
Yes.
able to sort of relax and have
Exactly.
that dialogue.
Right. It smoothens things. No? And for me, I was able to really just enjoy getting to see that different side of them and seeing how they perform or how they operate outside of the business.
Yeah, because I think that's healthy to have that personal touch.
Yes.
Because sometimes in this fast-paced world, it can get highly robotic in a way where it's
Yes.
just work, it's just pressure, it's
Yes.
just stress.
Yeah.
So I think we need that humanistic element now, even
Yes.
with the rise of technology and everything.
I agree.
We need that face-to-face personal touch where we interact as human beings.
You know, it's very, I think it's a very valid point, Mike. And I think that for all of us here in the audience as well, this was really manifested during COVID, right? Because for the longest time, we were just limited to phone calls. We were just limited to Skype calls or video calls. And I think that because the human element was taken out of that, honestly, it became really hard to work. So having that, now that we're done with COVID, now that we're back to normal, once more, I believe is such an amazing thing to have.
But going back to Japanese culture,
Yeah.
because me, I have this perception, like how the Japanese do things, they're very data-oriented,
Yes.
objective,
Yes.
and things are planned out properly.
Yeah.
Have you experienced like sort of a more candid approach from the Japanese? Like in terms of business, like how I would approach things. Sometimes it can
Yes.
be shotgun. Sometimes
Yes.
you need that flexibility because, of
Yes.
course, when you're dealing in the real world,
Mhm.
you can't be too bureaucratic. You
Yes.
can't be too structured because things change,
Right.
and you need to take a punch once in a while
Yes.
and roll with it. So is that accurate, my perception of how Japanese people work? And yeah, what was your experience?
That's a good point you raise. And honestly speaking, yes, there is a lot of emphasis on the data orientation, on trying to make things based on the facts.
Yeah.
But I think that it also depends on who is calling the shots or who is your boss. in
Yeah, the
particular.
decision maker, right?
Right.
Boils down to who decides the final.
Exactly. And I've had bosses that have been very rigid or very strict in terms of what it is they want. So in terms of the flexibility, they're more one-sided in the sense that I want to do something like this. If it doesn't match my preferences or if it doesn't match the company's preferences, then we're out. But I've also had the chance to work with other bosses who are more flexible, as you said, to sort of make a compromise and try to do it such that it's a win-win for both me and for the other party
So
as well.
varying styles still.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Because I think you need that flexibility. I think it's very critical.
I agree.
Also.
I agree. And I think that for me, having had the chance to go to different companies and see what different people's styles were, it sort of gave me that balance to make my own style of decision in my own work right now, to really try and see what method is best for what particular situation.
Yeah. Basically, I think you have to be open-minded because I think you can't be too flexible, but you can't also be too rigid.
Yes.
You really need that. And I
Exactly.
think you need discernment. It requires vision. It requires something deeper in terms of skill set and ability.
I agree. I agree. And this is something that I always admire about you as well, Mike, because from an early age, you've already found that sort of vision. And every day with the work that you do, you really try to ensure that you have an open mind to really consider what your employees have to say, what the people around you have to say. And I think that makes you an amazing person.
Wow, thank you. Okay, delving more into your time in Japan,
Sure.
what about sites or sightseeing? Did you go around the different areas of Japan? Did you have time? Because considering you mentioned overtime, and how often did you go through overtime?
Well, not to say overtime is a bad thing, you know. For me personally, I actually didn't think negatively about overtime because I needed to do the work, to finish the work before the deadline. And as long as I would be properly compensated, I didn't think that having to do overtime, despite how long it was going to be, was necessarily a bad thing. So in terms of what I was doing, again, it depended on whether I had a deadline or not. But there were days where I would come home 12 a.m.
Because you were in the office for like 7 hours extra?
Yeah, like I would start work from 8 in the morning all the way up to 12.
Wow.
Sometimes when the work finished, that was the time I would have dinner. And like, so basically 12 o'clock, I run to the, I stop work because I have to run to the train since that's going to be the last train already. And if I don't take that train, I'll be stuck unless I take a taxi. Now, I would do overtime from, let's say, like, so 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. Next day I go again 8 a.m. But again, it varied and it depended on whether there was a deadline. So for me, I think I had the chance to explore Japan in the weekends because as much as possible, I really tried not to have work interfere with my personal time during those 2 days so I could recharge. And honestly speaking, back then, there was this sort of mindset of mine to want to really focus on doing something productive. So there were, let's say, 5 years of my life, my first 5 years in Japan, where during the weekends, I just chose to simply recharge, chose to simply try to save as much money as I could.
So you just stayed in, you just slept.
Exactly. But later on...
Hibernate.
Yes, that's right. But later on, I realized that this was doing me no good, because I was living in such a great country, in such a beautiful country. And up to that point, I still wasn't able to explore or see what Japan had to offer. And so that's where I sort of built up my hobby of doing photography. And eventually, with enough support from other organizations, I decided to make my photography into something freelance. So basically, I would take pictures for certain tour organizations or certain agencies. They would send me to this faraway place or province.
So was this a side hustle? And did you
Yes.
also earn extra for this?
Yeah, it was more of a sort of per project basis sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't really interfere with my work. And basically, they would just send me to, let's say, a province in Japan that no one knows. Let's say Nagano, or let's say Sado, or Aomori for that matter. And I would go there, I'd go to the landscape, take a good picture, sell it to them, and our business was concluded. So that was the sort of freelance I did. Of course, with photography, I've expanded that to portraits, maternity shoots, weddings, and I suppose that having that aspect now be a part of my enjoyment was able to let me work through my concern that I needed to do something productive in the weekends. And that's how I was able to do the sightseeing, as you were saying.
When did you begin your journey with photography? Was it something you were always passionate about, or did you just happen to get interested much later? How did that begin?
Well, for me, actually, and again, honestly speaking, I never really had that hobby or that photographer's eye way back in college, high school, even grade school, And for me, let's say if I wanted to take a picture of something, I just take a picture with the cell phone, with a digital camera, and be done with it, But I think that it was through my experience of being in such a beautiful place that sort of inspired me to want to really capture the essence of that beauty and translate it or share it with people around the world. And so I think I started that hobby around 2015. So it's been a couple of years since then.
So what else do you take photos of? Anything? Scenery, weddings, or you do like people also?
Right. So basically, for my hobby personally, I do a lot of landscapes. And aside from that, from a freelance perspective, I, let's say, take pictures for tour organizations and give them those pictures so they can use in posters, advertisements. Talking about it from the more professional aspect, we have portrait shots, basically for, let's say, shots used in the studio, or let's say headshots, group shots, outdoor shoots.
So you do it professionally and you do it out of passion also.
Yes.
So both.
Yes.
And you sell them, so you also monetize in that sense.
Yes.
Do you join competitions or?
I used to in Japan. When I came back here to the Philippines, I wasn't as active. So right now, really, in the Philippines, I still do my freelance photography aside from my translation and interpretation work. But it's more that I'm focused on the jobs and less on the competitions. Just recently, I did this interior design shoot for basically some restaurants that just opened up. And so that's also something that I try to do aside from the weddings and landscapes.
Anything else you want to venture in that you haven't? In
Honest-
terms of photography.
In terms of photography, I've always been wanting to try different styles of photography. And talking about it from a more professional standpoint, I want to venture out into videography sooner or later. This is just sharing from personal experience again. During COVID, or rather before COVID hit, I actually had this dream to be a vlogger. And so
What type of vlogger? More on
Travel.
travels, food?
Both,
Both
yeah.
generally.
And so what I did during that time was, I still remember it very clearly. I said to myself, 2019, December, I was going to start on it. So I went to the DJI store. That's the one that sells the what do you call it, the mini cameras as well as the drones. I went there. I forced myself to buy a sort of pocket camera. It's called a DJI Osmo Pocket. Literally, you can put it in your pocket, take it out, and then turn it on and just do vlogging, regardless of where you are. And it also had a stabilizer, so you can run and it would still be good. But and I did start doing some videos already in a YouTube channel, but then COVID hit, and
Yeah.
so
Then push through.
yeah.
But maybe now you can slowly get into that.
I don't know. I mean, if perhaps I could get the proper support, I realized that it is tough. It is difficult, especially if you're a one-man team, in the sense that you're holding the camera and you have to think about what you want to say.
Yeah, I think it's best if it comes off natural, because I've actually interacted with some bloggers.
Yes.
Yeah, they do it because they enjoy it. So everything came natural to them. The editing, the content creation.
Right.
It just comes and it just flows. So.
Exactly. So I think maybe right now, I could definitely explore the vlogging route, but perhaps I'd like to learn and I'd like to grow in the aspect of videography, like taking those SDE, same day edit videos that the weddings have.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
It is.
Okay. Anyway, going back to Japanese culture,
Yes.
work,
Yes.
because I've always been curious.
Yes, yes.
I hear a lot often about harakiri, like
Yeah.
when the pressure is really on,
Yeah, yeah.
they just tend to end their life, or you read about it.
Yes.
Is that an accurate perception, that since people are so pressured at work or they fail at a certain thing, for Japanese they usually pick that route of not being able to face the shame?
It's a very valid question, and unfortunately, it's one of the most common problems in Japan right now. Now, just to give a little sort of explanation, harakiri in Japanese. So we know that as basically like killing oneself,
Yeah,
right?
suicide.
But, loosely translated or literally translated, hara is stomach, kiri is cut. So you cut open your stomach to show what's inside you. So when you talk about it on that aspect, yes, it can pertain to suicide, but perhaps it's more of trying to show that you are a clean person or a pure person. Now, there is another terminology for suicide in Japan, and that is called jisatsu. Like ji is literally you or myself, and satsu is to kill. So I think that's perhaps the thing you're talking about.
Yeah.
And suicide in Japan is...
Is it prevalent?
Yes. Unfortunately, it is very prevalent. I don't recall my facts, but if I'm not mistaken, I think that once every day, there is a suicide in Tokyo.
What do you think leads to that? Is it emptiness? Is it failures in the workplace? Is it depression? That's usually because of the pressures, like people can't cope enough?
There are, I think, a variety of factors. And I think that the situation, as you said, is that perhaps for some people, the pressures of work are too much, and they don't want to continue on because of the pressure, the strain, the difficulty, and the consequences.
But how is it perceived? Is it viewed as honorable to kill yourself there, that, oh, you picked that route because it was the higher thing to do? Is it perceived that way, or is it frowned upon?
It's it's, again, this is talking from personal experience,
Yeah.
you know, but it's a mixed bag.
Mixed.
With, let's say, government officials, if they do jisatsu, right? Like,
It's honorable. Like, what if someone was, his corruption was exposed
Yes.
and he kills himself? Is that viewed in a positive light or negative light? Oh, like, at least he had the honor of ending
Doing
his
that.
life because of what he did,
some people,
as opposed to, he couldn't face the challenges, how weak or how cowardly. You know, it can be perceived both ways. It can be viewed positively or negatively.
negatively, true. Some people, as you just said, would really perceive that as an honorable thing. Other people would prefer that they sort of face the music and face the imprisonment, because that could in itself be a worse punishment, because you have to try to atone for what you did. But from another perspective, actually, and again, this is such a sad situation. One of the common jisatsu methods is not to like kill yourself in the house. No, it is to jump in front of the train while it's moving.
That's the usual
That's the usual
occurrence
Yeah.
in Japan.
Yes,
The subway.
Yeah, and that's why you can basically see some signs. Maybe you've also noticed that probably, like in those trains, for example, that you have, let's say, it's written in both Japanese and English, like human-related accident, jinshinjiko, okay? And you might be thinking, human-related accident, what does that mean? Like maybe my t-shirt got stuck into the train while it closed, or maybe like, you know, my hand accidentally got, you know, stuck in the train. But that mostly corresponds to suicide. And the
But it's listed as suicide in the statistics, or is it not part of the count because it's deemed something else, that
Well,
it was an accident, whereas it was actually suicide?
I'm not too sure about the statistics for that, but generally speaking, when we hear jinshinjiko as a common person, we'd associate that to suicide, because nobody in their common mind would just try to jump in the train willingly. And here's the sad thing, you know, because suicide, again, happens for a variety of reasons, and it's either the pressures, or maybe because they have such a tough time in their personal lives, or maybe because they feel that nobody cares about them. And you know, honestly speaking, I understand, because I've lived alone. I've felt feelings of loneliness,
depression, or feeling down, not being
inadequate.
able to connect socially, interact.
Yes, and so it's really hard for them, you know, to try to connect with the outside world. And when you're in that mindset, you know, anything becomes possible. Like negative things become possible because of that mindset. But here's the thing, and here's the ironic thing. So you do suicide, right? And basically, like, you'd expect that sort of like everyone pities you, or like kind of like everyone grieves together with the family that loses their son or their kid. But it's the opposite, because you know what happens if they, and this is what I understand, right? Or what I heard, that basically once they identify who you are, of course they can't penalize you anymore because you've passed away. They'll penalize your parents or your family, or the next of kin, because you caused a public disruption. The train has to stop for 30 minutes. So that they...
So, madamay pa your parents,
Exactly.
in a way.
Exactly. And it's frustrating
For adding to some hassle that you caused, so your
the
parents
public.
have to be dragged into it.
Yeah. And yes, it is a hassle, of course, for a lot of people, because, you know, they have appointments, they need to go places.
It's true, yeah.
And you
It's
know,
a disruption.
you delay the train for 30 minutes. That's a big deal in
Because
Japan.
they have to clean up the mess.
Right.
I think maybe it would exceed
30 minutes,
30
yeah.
minutes for sure,
Depending-
cleaning up all that
Condition, yeah.
blood and whatever.
The situation, right?
Yeah.
So it's really hard to think what the situation is, if they're in the right or they're in the wrong, because again, suicide is no laughing matter. People die for a reason. But again, on the other perspective, it seems like the system there it's penalizing people for being under that condition. And so if we want to try to help people that are in that thought process, there must be something else that we can do, you know.
So is there enough being done regarding that in Japan, or people just do their thing? Is there enough awareness in that aspect?
Unfortunately, I'm not too sure about how active the government or the NGOs are in terms of curbing that sort of thing. But I think that what we can do perhaps as regular citizens is, you know, if you see a colleague or you see a friend that's just struggling, having a tough day, you know, maybe just check up on them once in a while. Say, hey, Tanaka-san, are you doing okay? Like, if you want, like, we can always drink sometime, you know, just hang out.
Yeah, try to connect, no?
Yeah, I think that's what we can do, you know.
Okay, deep subject.
Yeah, who would have thought, right? Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, but what made you decide to ultimately come back to Cebu? Because you had 11 years in Japan.
Yes, yes.
4 companies,
Yes.
made friends, had interactions,
Yeah.
leveled up in terms of professional experience. What led you back here?
There were a couple of reasons, actually. And I think the first reason was basically because of a wake-up call. We had one of the strongest typhoons, 2022, right? That was...
You mean Odette?
Odette, yes.
Well, late 2021,
Right.
December.
2021, yes, that's right. And that was December 2021. That was one of the worst typhoons, I believe, in Cebu history, in the sense that, like, telephone poles collapsed, buildings
Yeah,
broke
it took
down.
months to fully recover.
I
I was really there. My condo was really in bad shape.
How was it for you and your wife? Like, was everything?
We had to hide in the common CR in the
Yeah.
condo. That was the only safe spot. Because if we stayed in the masters, we could have been injured
Yes.
with the glass
breaking. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was tough, but yeah, we had to. But yeah, a good learning experience also, where we were able to really thrive and really be tested, getting gasoline,
Yes.
trying to fix things.
Right. And, you know, for me, I was still in Japan back then. And so, and I still remember this very clearly because it was actually a bad day for me because I was in the middle of trying to catch a deadline, and the day before the typhoon came, and my mom was calling because she was actually asking for something lang like that. I don't know, like, if she wanted to warn me about the typhoon or she wanted to talk to me about something or something, but I was busy with my deadline because I had to submit it within the day. And then when I answered her, I told her, like I said, I'll just call later like that because I'm very busy like that. And you know what happened, right? Like, next day, typhoon comes, no more reception, no more cell reception, no more contact with anybody.
It was very bad.
And I just found out about the damage through Facebook because somebody was able to post pictures to show that this is the situation. And on top of that, people were evacuating, people died, and you know, it really struck a chord with me because at that time, I was thinking that my supporting my family was through providing remittance, through providing funds. But at that moment, I realized that I needed to be better, since, you know, the true measure of being a parent's child is to really give back to them and be
better. In what sense do you mean?
To really just try to be with them, to take care of them.
Beyond the money support
Yes.
that you've been giving.
Exactly.
The presence.
Exactly. And for the longest time, I always had that mindset that maybe just giving back in terms of like monetary aspects or things like that was enough. But when I was in that position, and of course after that I kept on trying to call, I kept on trying to look for people who could connect me to my parents just to see if they were okay or not okay. it literally took 2 weeks before I could get back in touch with them. And even during that time, of course, like, thankfully, my two parents were okay, but the damage to our house was severe. Like, there was no
It
electricity.
was a house, not a condo.
Basically like a sort of apartment. So roof was damaged. Basically, like, of course, car was damaged. No electricity, no water. It was hard. And I believe for our viewers here today as well, I'm sure that all of us had that sort of shared experience that life was difficult,
It was really like a disaster movie. Like it was kind of an end of the world type movie. Because I remember gas stations were lined up for 6 hours or more. You had to line up ahead at dawn just so you can get
it, right?
And
it was terrible, truly. And that was that wake-up call to tell me that, look, my parents are not getting any younger. They're already senior. And if you cannot even be there for them in those points or in the times that they need you, then what is the point of being their child or their son? So that sort of moved me to make the decision to kind of leave my career there.
And be more present
Yes.
for your parents.
Yes. And, of course, now that I'm back here in the Philippines, indeed, I get the chance to take care of them, to see them daily. I get the chance to talk around with my dad, my mom. And I think that it's thanks to that we are closer more than ever. But of course, at the same time, still have to look for a living. So, and of course, I didn't want to waste the skill set that I gained in Japan. So that's why I started my freelance interpretation and translation work, where let's say government will hire me, or let's say private investors or private industries wanting to expand in the Philippines hire me, so that I sit in the middle to kind of do the interpretation and document translation in the meetings and stuff.
I can certainly avail of such services because we do deal with a lot of Japanese businessmen, executives, so that might come in handy one day for me if I learn some Japanese.
For sure.
So we can collaborate or venture into that also.
Definitely.
Or maybe should we have like visitors? We can certainly utilize such.
I'd be more than happy to help out. And if you need anything Japan related, you can just let me know anytime. Always happy to help.
Okay. Anyway, you strike me as a very good son because I remember early on you were really close to your mom also. And it's good that you still really think about the well-being of your parents as they're aging. I also came to realize that, especially I lost my dad last year, so that was quite painful. And I realized, it's true that we get so caught up with work that we set aside the relationships that matter. So that's a good realization, and we need that balance.
I know that, and I still remember this back when we were in grade school, that you were also very close to your mother, right? And I think that, for me, that sort of made me realize that the two of us were alike in a lot of ways, in the sense that, you also deeply care for your family, and, that's truly a nice thing.
I think family is the cornerstone of course, society. Without it, it would just be chaotic.
Right.
But it's challenging to keep things afloat because we get so caught up with different things. And,
of course.
And clashes occur, disagreements happen, and that's really part of the condition we're in. So it's really an ongoing battle as we progress each day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not easy. It's easier said than done.
Definitely.
Like we can throw out some quote or some sound bite and sound really mature, but in reality it can be quite the opposite or quite ironic.
True.
So
of life, I suppose.
So going back to the interpreting,
sure.
When did you decide to get into that? When you were back in Cebu, that's what you wanted to focus on?
Yes. So that was...
So you're freelance also.
Yes.
So you just, companies call you up if they need to avail of such.
Yes. So it's more of like a kind of referral sort of process because as of right now, I'm still making my website. But generally speaking, Japanese friends of mine know other Japanese, or let's say friends of mine from Philippines or abroad know some other acquaintances, and that's how they know of me. And
So through word of mouth.
through word of mouth, yes.
You're not really marketing yourself so loudly as this Japanese interpreter.
Not as much. I would definitely like to put myself out there, but I guess at this point, I'm also trying to figure out how I can put myself out there. But so far, I've been very lucky to have the chance to have done a couple of interpretation jobs for the government and for other companies, and yeah.
What's the rate for that? Or what's the, like, just a ballpark if you don't want to specify too much?
Well, I think that really depends on the type of interpretation that you provide, and also who the interpreter is going to be. Because there can be some interpreters that will charge super cheap, but I have seen that these interpreters, and it is very sad to see, because some customers might have high expectations of other interpreters, but the problem is that the way they translate is too basic, and they just tend to translate word for word, which is, from my experience, something that you cannot exactly do, because you need to, and this is something that I believe in the UN and other sort of global interpreters do as well, that you need to know how to temper language so that it doesn't create a war. Like if somebody says like a bad word, or if somebody says like you're crazy or something, you wouldn't want to say that to the person that you're talking to, because that could lead to a breakdown in negotiations. So you need to try to find an appropriate statement that can sort of temper that out. And with what I provide, that's what I try to do. Along with another thing that I have noticed, talking about, let's say, structure, for instance. Some people, the issue is that when they come in, they don't necessarily have a game plan in mind, bullet points that like, okay, by the end of the meeting, I want this to be done. By the end of the meeting, I want us to come into an agreement with something like that. So what I do is during the meeting and even before the meeting, I try to talk with the parties in advance to sort of get an idea of what it is exactly that they want, so that meeting comes, everything is smooth.
Yeah, I think that gap is unavoidable, because I think I've seen that firsthand also, where you want to say something, but even if you translate it, it can't be word for word, because it comes off totally different.
Yes.
Like you meant to say this, but even if translated, it comes off differently. So it's perceived differently, not what you intended it to be.
Yeah.
So there's that gap, and it can be difficult, especially, of course, different cultures. Like, of course, like Cebu, there's a Cebuano culture, right? How we say things, how it's perceived.
Right.
Then if you relay that to someone in Manila or a Tagalog, it's a different perception. So I think we should be aware of those tiny subcultures, you would say.
Agree.
Yeah.
And so with that sort of level of service that I provide in terms of like filling in those gaps, or kind of like making a clear sort of summary or story or game plan, that overall package is the service that I provide. So it is.
So you have to understand subcultures also, of like example Cebuano, where we can be self-deprecating at times, or we can come off like, the tone is harsh, but it's meant to be a joke. So some can be triggered with that if it's another part of the Philippines, that person you're interacting with.
I just came from a wedding. It was a Filipino-Japanese wedding where I was the host. They hired me as the host there. And there was this best man who was doing his wedding toast, and like he was saying a lot of, the jokes that you were just saying right now. And for me, I had to make sure that those jokes would be seen in a better light, because obviously if I just said it word for word, that would be a huge
So
insult.
was it well received?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Because sometimes you can walk into a room and it can be very cold, di ba?
Yes.
Like they don't get the humor.
Yes. It was, of course, part of my role as the host to liven up the audience, you know. And thankfully, both the bride and the groom appreciated it, and it seemed like everything went well. We had a fun time, and now it's a good memory.
So wait, you mentioned hosting. You also do hosting?
Yes, yes. So I also am an events host, again freelance, events host, wedding host. The project.
What type of events other than weddings? What about bachelor party or
Yeah.
or anything
Yeah.
or bridal showers
Yeah.
or what type of events?
Well, I try not to limit myself in terms of what I do. So I've done basically like corporate events, like let's say the sort of company wants to do, let's say, an outing, and they would like someone
outing
to-
or some awarding ceremony. Okay.
But of course, talking about personal events, as you said, like bridal shower, things like that, if they need a host to help them out, then yeah, definitely more than willing to help out. For me right now, majority of the work that I do is more bilingual events hosting. So, for instance, with the Filipino-Japanese weddings, what happens there is that although I host, I speak in English, but I actually give a translation from time to time to sort of explain what are the processes in the wedding, like the sort of shoe game. Do you remember, like race if you think this is the person who's ano, or
So you have to conceptualize
Oh, yeah.
the games,
Yes.
the punchlines.
Yes, yes.
So I imagine that's outside of your comfort zone,
Yeah.
given I've known you as similar to me, an
Yes.
introvert.
Yes.
And of course, as a host, you have to
Yes.
perform, be lively.
Yes.
So it's good that you also embarked on that
I
for
mean,
your growth also,
it's-
personally.
Like, I'll be honest with you, Mike. I think that it is definitely challenging, because whether it is learning games for a wedding, or whether it is learning new vocabularies, let's say to talk about farming in interpretation, or to talk about medical terms in interpretation, it's definitely a different ballpark every single time. And so what I try to do is to be more adequate, to be worth what people are paying me to do. I have to really study in advance to really try to get a feel.
So when did you begin the hosting?
Oh, that was actually also the same year that I came
Photography?
back. Yeah. No. So
Photography 2015, right? you
yes,
mentioned.
that's right. So
Came back what year?
That-
After Odette,
after
this
Odette.
was 2022.
2022.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. So I started out my hosting career also at that same time in 2022. Of course, when I was back in Japan, I had the opportunity to host as well for my friends, you know, when they were about to have an engagement, things like that. But I think I just thought of it or made it as a more professional thing when I came back.
Okay. Interesting. So you're exploring different fields, which is
It's-
remarkable. And I commend you for that, because even myself, there are things I may have wanted to try, but I never really took that leap. So it's admirable to have that courage to really go for it.
I mean, again, and I'm just gonna be honest with you, Mike. No, like, you know, I don't know if I would be considered as courageous in that aspect, because aside from doing interpretation, I also fall back to one of the jobs that I grew up in, which is supply chain management. So when I came back here as well, with that supply chain management experience, I also use it as my job right now as a consultant, and I do a lot of consulting work for different Filipino companies. So they hire me to fix a problem in their system, to fix a problem in their supply chain process, whether that's basically procurement, logistics, or forecasting for accurate figures. And
So you do consultation?
yeah, to a certain extent also. basically, like if they would like me to be their in-house consultant, like a lawyer of sorts, then I also do that as well.
Maybe I can also try consulting
For sure.
for our industry.
Definitely.
I think there are commonalities from where you're from, so it's still marketing a product, it's still sales. So
Yeah.
I think many of the things would still apply. Yeah.
For sure, and I'd be more than happy to help out. And so, with that consulting, that sort of became that's sort of like my bread and butter at this point. While at the side, of course, I do my interpretation, translation, and photography. That's
So what's a usual day like for you? Is your schedule packed? You have your calendar sorted out in advance?
So for me, most of what I do at this point is basically focusing my work on the consultation aspect of supply chain, because right now I'm being employed to take care of some supply chain processes. So that's usually what takes up most of my time during the day. But of course, if a interpretation request or job or translation job comes like from time to time, I make sure to block my schedule to accommodate that. And then when the day finishes, I then have my next job, which is to teach freelance online.
This is all primarily here in Cebu.
Yes, but in terms of, let's say, my interpretation work, I do fly to Japan for interpretation. I do fly to Manila. My most recent interpretation job was actually at Gensan because I was doing work for Century Pacific with some of their translation requests as well. And with my teaching, it is online. So regardless of where my students are, I have some Japanese that want me to teach them English in Japan. And I have, of course, our Filipinos that want to learn Japanese to be relevant or to be able to use it in their work. So yeah, I do all of that online.
Okay, and I noticed you've been joining some speech contests, Toastmasters, right? You're active.
Yes.
When did you venture into that also, and how was that journey, considering you've been getting a lot of success there? And what tips would you maybe share for people out there who want to improve in terms of speech delivery, speech making?
Well, I'm sure that at the same time, you also have a lot to share to our audience, especially with the way that you carry yourself and the confidence that you have, Mike. So, but talking about it from a personal perspective, I joined Toastmasters also the same year that I came back. So that was 2020.
Oh, this is Toastmasters here in Cebu.
Yes.
Okay.
And honestly speaking, again, I keep on saying the word honestly speaking, but back then in Japan, there was an invitation for me to join the Japanese Toastmasters. The Japanese Toastmasters was a mix between Japanese and English. But during that time, since I was so busy with my work, I felt like I couldn't be able to set time for Toastmasters back then. So that's why I didn't decide to join into it when I was there. But when I came back here, I decided to give it a shot because I could see how Toastmasters was able to change some of my friends and some of my cousins as well.
You mean change in terms of confidence, their speaking ability, esteem, self-esteem?
And that was something very inspiring for me because at the end of the day, I want to continuously learn and I want to find ways to become a better person. And that was the main reason that I had when I joined Toastmasters. But when I was there, I realized that it was more than just the learning. It was more about the community. When I came back here, aside from you, Mike, I only had limited friends because a lot of my friends who were in Manila and of course in Cebu have their own families already, So having had a chance to be able to connect with a community, to build new friendships, to build new relationships, that was I believe the opportunity in Toastmasters, being in Toastmasters, made me have all these relationships and friendships. And,
So primarily, you wanted to level up in terms of skill, in terms of your abilities. Basically, you wanted to enhance
Yes.
your skills and be better as a person.
And at the end of the day, more than just that, I was able to make a lot of great friendships with a lot of good people. The nice thing about Toastmasters is that it's one of the clubs it's one of the few clubs that I've noticed promotes and encourages people to help one another from a very impartial standpoint, in the sense that you just help out a person for the sake of helping them out, which is why one of the things that we do in Toastmasters, you give a speech. After you give a speech, you have a friend that evaluates you and tells you, look, you had a good job. You did good here, you did good here, you did good
So
here.
critical
Yeah.
feedback.
Maybe you'd like to improve on this aspect as well. And, at the end of the day, you're not blaming the person for what he did wrong. You're just giving him tips on how he can even be better and encouraging him to do another speech in the future. So that kind of positive vibe, that kind of positive community, I believe, is something which I think you were asking for now. Like you were saying, what advice can we give to the audience on how they improve themselves? Be in that community, whether that is Toastmasters, whether that's a group of friends that really encourages you to go out of your shell and be yourself when you're with, other
Anything
people.
to improve oneself and level up.
Yeah. In terms of improving ourselves, leveling up, I think that, of course, speaking is always one aspect to improve on.
I think it's very critical to enhance one's speaking skills, because
Yes.
it's your only way to fully
Yes.
articulate
Yes.
what you stand for, who you are, to
Yes.
connect. So I think that's something that's taken for granted in a
Right.
way.
And I think, Mike, it would be also good for our audience to kind of hear what you have to say, because I know you to be a very deep person, a philosophical person, and sometimes I read your, articles in Sunstar. Is that right? Or
Yeah, there was a time,
Yeah.
but now I've been quite busy, so I haven't had the privilege to really make some articles. But that was a phase also during the pandemic struggles where I expressed myself,
Yeah.
but more on about humanity,
Right.
my deep thoughts on various aspects of the suffering that we
Right.
face, the
Right.
trials that we endure.
Yes.
Because everyone faces trials, regardless of race,
Yes.
field, social status. We all
Mhm.
face something
Yeah.
in this world.
I mean, I really admire what you do in terms of that, and it's really such a joy to read. And sometimes it becomes very hard to express ourselves when it comes to those things. But when, let's say, you talk from the perspective of writing and actually speaking to somebody, it's a different ballgame, right? And so how do you try to relate that into a more speaking kind of perspective?
Well, it's a different journey, as you say. It's
Yeah.
true. With writing, I'm able to gather my thoughts
Mhm.
properly. With speaking, it's a different ball game, especially if it's spontaneous.
Yeah.
Because I try to enhance my impromptu
Yes.
speech. But sometimes I can be very rigid because I need things
Yes.
structured in my head.
Yes, yes.
But when you're in front of a crowd,
Yeah.
it can be quite hazy
Yes.
in a way na your thoughts are all over the place.
Right.
Plus, your nerves kick in sometimes when it's a big event.
Right, right.
So it can be quite scattered,
Right.
your thought process.
Right, right.
So yeah, slowly. Sometimes, before I used to prepare what I say, but then you have to look.
at it. Yeah.
Then I tried a more candid approach with bullet points. So slowly I'm enhancing that.
I mean, you should not sell yourself short, Mike. When we were back in grade school, I know who you were back in grade school, and just looking at you right now, the person that you are, the professional that you are, you know, it's been quite a journey, and you are at, I believe, the pinnacle of all of it. So.
Oh, I wouldn't say pinnacle, but slowly, of course, we try, but it's still uncertain. There are still many areas we need to work on. But with the writing, yeah, that started during COVID, because that's when I sort of came out of my shell in a way, because I saw so much chaos, so much suffering. So it was actually a leap also to actually express personal thoughts. So it was also out of my comfort zone.
Right.
And I didn't know how people would perceive it, but somehow it turned out well. But I haven't been posting much about thoughts lately. It just comes out every once in a while, usually at night, sometimes when you can't sleep early. So I just sort of unload there.
Right.
But maybe it's also innate with my personality, because I think it varies with the different personalities we have. So it's a different knack for everyone.
True.
But I think we each have our value in our own way.
Yes.
Like someone can be good at speaking or writing, but some can excel in other fields, but they're not necessarily recognized.
True.
So, example, like how often do we recognize guards or janitors who excel at their job, or plumbers, but they're often overlooked.
Yes.
So it's always people in the limelight who tend to shine, but equally the skill set required is similar.
Agree.
Yeah.
I mean, every person has their own story, and every person has something that they are doing, whether that is because of circumstance or whether it is because that is what they want to do. And you know, what we can do is just really respect and try to support them in what they need to do to be the best they can be.
Yeah. Some of us are just more privileged.
Yes. Yeah.
But some are equally as good or even better, but they just don't have that opportunity to shine.
Right.
So as I said, everyone has their own value.
Hopefully things start to equalize in the future, that everyone really gets an equal shot at, you know, being what they want to be, despite everything.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, going back maybe on a lighter subject, we were classmates, if you remember.
Yes.
Back in the first grade up until
the sixth grade, we finished.
Oh, sixth,
the whole,
right?
Yeah, we
the
finished
whole
the whole
elementary.
Yeah.
And I had good memories of you. I know you were a straight A student. I was more of the unfocused type.
Oh.
I mean, I wasn't as focused as you in school, I remember. And you were more of the studious type, right?
I mean,
because I know you excelled. Even back then, you excelled in the speeches when we had presentations in class. So,
well, to be fair, I mean, the only reason why I excelled in speech contests or why I did well in studying is because I had a support system. You know, my family, my parents, some coaches, to really like propel me to a higher level. But you know, at the end of the day, like, I don't know what I was doing as well.
But I think you were better prepared in terms of orientation, the discipline. And it really showed, because you were able to work with multinational companies, step out of your comfort zone and travel. Whereas me, I was more of within my comfort zone in comparison to you. Well, I did venture into some other areas, but not at the same level. So I think it also, you also bore the fruit of your labor back when you excelled in,
you know,
in education, in of course early elementary years.
I mean, like, if you're saying that, you know, like actually for me it's the opposite. That, like, you know, I admire you because of all the things that you've done to put yourself here in this moment, to have an amazing family life, to have an amazing professional life, and you know, as I've said before, you inspire me, and you are a role
Well,
model.
thank you, but it's not as easy as it looks.
Of course it isn't.
And of course I have a lot of help.
Yeah.
Of course we have employees, my brother, who I also commend greatly, my family, well, my mother, who's still quite active also in trying to plug in whatever is lacking.
Yes, yes.
So I'm grateful. I feel blessed also. So I'm thankful for all the opportunities that come.
Right.
Anything else you might want to talk about? Since this is just a very free flow.
I mean, like when I came back.
Or what's important to you that you might want to unload or express out there to whoever might see this in the future?
I think maybe perhaps words that I'd like to share with our audience, with the people that are watching today, is a very simple but cliche sort of phrase, and that is to never stop. Never stop in the sense of dreaming, working, and finding your passion. There is a lot of hesitancy that I've noticed with a lot of people, in the sense that they don't want to do, or they don't want to venture out, they don't want to try to find a job elsewhere because it is out of their safety net. They don't want to explore a hobby or do something that they'd like to do because it is out of their budget. They don't like to try to do something because they think that there are limitations that are blocking them from doing what they want to do. But for the longest time, again, and this was something I mentioned earlier, if we don't try to go beyond these limitations of ours, then we never really know how life can be beautiful. And so if I never chose to delve into photography, I would never have been able to experience the joy of going to see a sunset and taking a good shot of the sunset and sharing that with the people around me. And so I think for me, and I think for everyone here in the audience today, I'd like to encourage everyone to look back into their lives, look back into the moments when they were young. Maybe you've had dreams, unfinished dreams, perhaps things in your bucket list that you couldn't do just because you didn't have the courage to do it. And if you do not feel scared. Do not feel ashamed. Do not be sad that you haven't done it. You still have the rest of your lives to do it. So as early as now, try to make that change, to really just go forth and be your best self,
Wow,
So,
nice message.
I guess that's perhaps what I can share with everyone.
Okay, maybe delving a bit into, I know you also cook, right?
Oh.
I saw some of your posts that you also tried making some pasta or some Japanese dishes.
Yeah.
What's your expertise? What cuisine?
Oh, well, for me, I don't really have a specialty per se, in the sense that back then, when I was going to cook something, it was a very simple process for me. Like, day before, I would be in the CR, and then I'd be saying, what do I want to cook for tomorrow? And then I say, sige, I'll cook a steak. And then so I cook a steak. Generally for me, it's been a process of trial and error, and of course trying to watch YouTube, taking some cooking classes back then to really get a sense of how to cook. So far, I guess, if you're trying to ask like what my expertise in, I cook a lot of steaks. So
your expertise is steaks?
perhaps, but
yeah. Or what are you most proud of? Like, what's a must-try if someone were to taste your cooking once only? What would you prepare?
Well, I guess maybe that would be either my steaks or my fish and papillion. I'm not really a fan of fish, but there was this cooking style that I discovered that really gives the fish a whole new flavor, and that was through papillion. So it's the one with the parchment paper, and it's fairly easy to make. It's super delicious. It's super healthy. So yeah, I guess maybe that's something I can cook for you in the future.
Yeah, perhaps. Okay. What about your lifestyle? I know, of course, you do all the work that you do, photography, interpreting, Toastmasters. You're quite proactive. What about staying healthy? Are you into sports, physical activities, uh, any other hobbies?
That's actually something that honestly I really need to work on. And seeing you and your wife Miko, it is truly inspiring because I believe you guys run every day, right?
Well, not every day, but we do join some races, 12Ks, maybe
Right.
21Ks eventually.
Right.
42, I don't know, that's quite far, but we've been joining some 10K, 12K races.
That's really inspiring. For me, I actually have been slacking a lot in that regard because my mindset, unfortunately, and I'm trying to wean myself off of it. I'm trying to change it. Is that, like, look, I have work to do. I need to finish the work. Once I finish the work, if there's time, I'll exercise. But then again, here's the thing, and you'd probably relate to it. If you don't stop working, or if you don't put a stop to the work, then the work never stops, right? So that's the problem. Like, I just find myself working in the computer, and then I realize, oh, it's 5 p.m. now. And then I didn't exercise, I didn't do anything. And then in a few hours, I have to go and teach already online. So there's no more chance to exercise, you know? But I need to have that sort of mindset or regimen to stop, like maybe in the middle of the day, go to the gym, go swim, or just eat a little bit healthier, you know? I think that's something I need to work on.
So you cook often at home, or do you get grab food
Uh,
or alternate once in a while?
So when I go with my girlfriend right now, we go on dates. So when we go on dates, of course, that usually means having to eat out or like getting grab food and just, you know, enjoying a meal together at home. But yeah, at home, when I'm at home, we usually cook. We try to make the food just as simple as possible, so that there's less preparation. And so what we try to do is we try to cook things like, let's say, sort of noodles, for instance, that, you know, like pancit, for example, that has all the meats and the carbs. So you have a
Healthy balance,
Yes.
protein, veggies, so it's all there.
yeah, a 3-in-1 sort of thing.
The go grow glow stuff.
Right.
Yeah, the usual.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. How was your childhood like? Because we were children together. We basically spent most of our elementary time together.
Yes.
How was your childhood, and was it instrumental in truly molding you to who you are today? And who were some of your role models and influences growing up?
I think that I've been very lucky. I suppose we've been very lucky to really have the parents that we have, because they make us who we are today. And I think that the fact of the matter is, when someone raises you in the right way, you just kind of want to give back, you know? And I think that for me, the reason why I try to help or be a nice guy in general, in the way I conduct my life, is because that's the way that my parents taught me when I was growing up, you know? You just be a friend to all. Why be an enemy? Or you just do what you can and then let God take care of the rest, you know? And for me, I try to live by that sort of philosophy that they taught me for so long, to just be an overall nice guy. And so I think with your next question about who my role models are, I suppose it's really my parents, and I think to a high regard my dad. With my dad, it's a little bit of a sort of mixed bag again, because for the longest time my dad was actually working in Butuan, and because he was working there, he was trying to support us. So for the longest time, and I think you've noticed this when we were in grade school back then, it was just my mom who was
Yeah,
doing.
I saw your mom more, but
Right.
I did catch glimpses of your dad once in a while, but it was primarily your mom.
Right, because my dad was in Butuan. And so my dad was busy taking care of the funds, the finances, while my mom was here taking care of me. And so because of that, unfortunately, I never really had the chance to sort of, connect with my dad to a deeper level when I was young. But when I had the chance to become independent, when I went to Japan, and now that I'm back here, I get more quality time with my dad. And throughout the years, I realized how much of a genuine and a generous person he has been. Because despite him having needs and wants of his own to want to be here with me, or despite having the need to want to travel around the world, to explore, to want to see all these things, to enjoy, he chooses to stay here. He chose to stay in Butuan to really make it such that me and my mom could be able to enjoy life. And so I don't know, I mean, for me, that in itself is worthy of being an inspiration. Because at the end of the day, right, when we are fathers, or when we are basically the man of the house, we need to think more than just ourselves, and we need to think of how we can benefit the people that depend on us. And so we put our needs aside for the sake of the greater good. And that is really something that, is the reason why my dad is my role model.
Okay.
And I only hope that, throughout the course of my life, I can only be half as good as him,
I think it boils down to taking in responsibility, impacting others, impacting the community.
Right, right.
Ultimately. But you mentioned being a nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
But there are times we do need to draw the line also in making a stand also.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a need for those healthy disagreements.
Yes, yes.
So without, of course, being a nice guy, but not losing yourself in the process, or not being too politically correct, or you just nod along, because of course we need to differentiate or make a statement or make a stand in whatever disagreements, and that leads to realizations and progress. It's through dialogues like that.
Discourse, yeah.
Discourse.
I agree. Because going back to the example we talked about earlier of like how I dealt with like my bosses that were 50 years old while I was still 20 years old, the secret there that I learned was really to try to find common ground and to try to find what it is benefits them, so that I can provide that to them, so that by the end of the day, the two of us walk our separate ways happy and satisfied. So knowing what your worth is and knowing what you have to say, while also taking note of what that other person needs, having that balance and having that discourse, as you say, is the key. Yeah.
Okay. What's your general philosophy in life, and what are some, do you have religious views, spiritual views that you subscribe to? Or what's your outlook in general in how you approach, of course, the uncertainties and where your life goes until, of course, we eventually pass on, while everybody dies eventually. So what's your framework?
I think that the philosophy I have in life is really just don't waste a single moment. And for the longest time, again, I'll be honest with you, I was not doing that when I was in Japan, because again, I focused on the work, which was, of course, a very good thing in itself. But on the days that I had time to relax, I never did. I mean, I chose to just hide in my own house and just basically watch TV or just keep to myself. You know? But there were a lot of moments in my life where I learned that I should not waste a single moment. For instance, when I was in Japan, I had this chance to be with a Japanese girlfriend. And the reason that we broke up was because of differences in terms of work schedules. And
what about value system or
value system? Like, honestly speaking, when you talk about value system with Japanese, it's not so different from Filipinos.
Asian generally,
Yeah.
there are similar traits.
Yes, but there's a slight difference when it comes to independence, because in the Philippines, we have close family ties. But in Japan, it's a little bit closer to America in the sense that by 18 or 19, when you're in college already, you go, you live your own life, you graduate, you take a job, you be self-sustaining. And that's why even when you're in high school, they actually have, I wouldn't say OJTs, but like a lot of the kids work part-time in convenience stores there in Japan. And so what happened for me, going back to my girlfriend, was that because of work schedules, I chose to, it was a mutual decision, but I believe that if I only pushed stronger, then things might have been different. Things could have been different, but I didn't. And that was one thing that weighed on me. For instance, going to another aspect, talking about the, and this is a little bit personal. This is with my aunt. My aunt or my ai, she was someone who I looked to as a second mother. And for ai, she was really the one who took care of me when my parents were busy from time to time. She was basically the person that would also take care of my mom when they were growing up back then, because there were a lot of sisters and brothers, and my grandparents couldn't really be there for all of them. And I was so confident to think that I would still have all the time in the world with her, because she wasn't old. I mean, I think she was just close to 70 years old, so relatively young. But she passed away because of some complications with the body.
This was abrupt. Did you see it coming?
No, it was very abrupt. And again, this factors into my regret, because there was one time again, I was so focused with my work that my mom kept on calling. And then I was literally in the middle of a business meeting.
Yeah,
and
so
it
you
kept on
couldn't
calling.
pick up, of course.
I couldn't pick up. And then my mom kept on calling, my mom kept on texting. And that was like literally from Philippines to Japan. So you can guess how expensive that must have cost. And I didn't answer. And so after the work finished, like around 7 p.m., I called my mom. And then my ai passed away already. There were some complications, I think, with the stomach.
You were close to
I was
her,
close. I
very
was
close.
to her. Yeah. But I didn't, in that moment, I didn't think that it was as important. Well, I didn't know what it was, right? And I was focused at the task at hand.
Yeah,
But
it's hard to really balance, as we talked about.
right.
Of course, family, work. Yeah, it can be quite overbearing at times.
And so because we never really know what's going to happen, that's what factors into my philosophy, that we never waste a single moment. And if we have a chance to just be there with the people we care about, if we have the chance to do something we want to do, we just do it. Because maybe we can just, lie on the ground tomorrow. We never know, right? So
Yeah, I think we need to value the relationships we have,
yes,
the close ones, of course,
equally, yeah.
because of how uncertain our lives can be.
Yes.
Accidents can happen.
Yes.
Someone can develop a sickness.
Yes.
Cancers have become more prevalent.
True.
It's just very uncertain.
Right.
Like, this journey we're in, how long it would take.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel as though the more technologically advanced we get,
It's very fast-paced now.
right? And the problem here is that I feel that our quality of life is degrading. I mean,
Yeah, that's the irony, because
Yeah.
we're advancing so much, but
yes.
in terms of the quality,
Yeah.
it's like there's less interaction,
Yeah.
where everything's just push of a button.
Yes.
Even groceries now, even
Yeah.
food,
Yeah.
even like calls. Like we can basically do Zoom calls
Right.
with family members,
Yeah.
or
It's
yeah.
like, you know, when I look back at our childhood, because we're both 1990s kids, right?
Yeah, 90s kids.
Right? And the thing about it is that even from, let's say, the programming on TV, or let's say the family values that we shared, I could still remember that as kids, like I would play with my cousins, you know, tumbalata, or
There's less of that now. It's like
Yeah.
mostly kids are on their iPads.
Yeah.
It's all digital
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
There's been a shift. More everything, like pads, they're in that zone.
Exactly, and because of that, people become less trusting to one another. People become more distant to one another, and I think that it makes the world less of a happy place to be in because of that. You know.
It's quite transactional how we
Yeah.
approach things.
Right. Right.
Okay. What about, as I asked, religious views? What are your spiritual views?
Well-
or why are we here? What's the purpose of life? What's it all for?
Well, I am a Catholic. Yes. I and this is again probably something that I also need to work on. Perhaps is my
Spiritual life?
my religion as well, in the sense that, like, I'm not as active, in the sense that I do not necessarily go to church every week. Like when I was in Japan, maybe once a month, or maybe like during Christmas or things like that on the big days. But what I try to do instead is just try to keep a more personal level of relationship with God. And so
I think that works better, actually, because me, I've always been skeptical regarding especially organized religion, where it's the setup, it's very much like very structured, very much like a company or a business, and it's led by some elders who have some of their own agenda also. So I'm quite cynical of that. I would prefer a more personal relationship with our Creator, and we seek guidance in how we embark the challenges, and as long as it leads to growth, maturity, improves your entire well-being, then I'm all for it.
Right. At the end of the day, I think regardless of the religion and regardless of what our principles and belief system is, whether that is Islam or whether that is Catholicism or Christianity, I think that the values of being a person for others tend to stand out, you know, and as long as we do good with one another.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
morals still kick in, because I think it's innate
Yes.
for us to have that sense of right and wrong. That objective morality is there.
Yes.
And I would say that's from our Creator.
Yeah.
So I think God is the one who
Yes.
creates these
Morals.
these
Yeah.
rules
Yeah.
that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
Our sense of going about our tasks and discerning
Right.
right and wrong.
Right. We just need to abide by that, I think, and I believe that makes our life all the more worth it, you know.
Yeah. Okay. I think boils down to finding that peace that you
Yes.
can't find, and that unconditional love, because I think God is love, and
Yes.
you find an unconditional love, which is the highest form of love.
Yes.
Once we come to terms with that, then I think that's the ultimate.
True.
With Christianity, honestly, I still wrestle, but I'm still somewhat open about it. Because actually, in terms of religion, that's always been of interest to me. But I know it's very complex as a subject. So, yeah, I'm open-minded regarding it. But it's still something I navigate. Because there's a subjective aspect to religion, your own experience, and there's dangers of dogma, which I'm worried about, but there might be some truth to it. Because with Christianity, of course, it centers around Jesus Christ, but then he did impart substantive teachings with unconditional love. So, but I struggle with connecting it to day-to-day struggles of life. So it's still an ongoing journey. Because I've never been a churchgoer. I've never been one of those religious types that have these supernatural experiences, otherworldly experiences.
Right.
So it's a journey still. It's ongoing.
Definitely, and you should never discount the journey that you take, no? Because for me personally, as you said, right, like religion, we never know, right? Like with the people who lead, there can be they can have different thoughts, they can have different beliefs,
different ideologies, different dogmas, and that is dangerous if it replaces what's true, or if it's dogma can create certain avenues which people can get really wired in, and it can be mistaken, or it can be something else.
Of course. So I think that, you know, it's if having a religion or having to file into that sort of compromises what you think is the right thing to do, then that in itself should be something that you need to think about, whether this is something that you would like to do moving forward. So really, as you said, the process of having it as a journey, I think, is something that we really need to take our time to really like process through everything, because nobody can say immediately that, like, look, I go to church every week, so like I'm a holy man, you know. Like there's a lot of reflection that goes with it. There's a lot of
there are a lot of ironies also that go with that. So it's very complicated for me. Like we have commonalities as human beings. We can relate, which is why we can have dialogue.
Yes.
But there are also areas which are very complex in a way. Like my experiences vary from yours. You had a different journey, but we're able to relate as human beings. And in terms of how we process, how we grasp, how we our thought process, basically, how we process things, it's quite different. Plus you mix in ideology. You can have your belief system, I can have mine, and you can be wired into that, I can be wired into mine. So, but it's hard to really correlate it. So I think that's what I wrestle with presently.
Understandable. I mean, like, if you need a person to philosophize with, or if you need a person to just kind of bounce ideas back and forth, I'm always happy to
and thank you for that. Okay, so I guess we did cover on a lot today, and perhaps a parting message to whoever's watching this, because I think the good thing about having these podcasts that I've been doing with various people, it's that it stands the test of time. So in a way that you can review this maybe years down the road. And it's good that we have this dialogue. So anything you might want to embark on, maybe relevant issues that people go through today, or a message to the world.
Well, I think that most of the message that I suppose I'd like to share right now is similar to what I mentioned earlier, to just simply never stop. Never stop dreaming, never stop believing, never stop pursuing the things that you really want to do. Because again, at the end of the day, we never really know how much time we have left. For all we know, tomorrow we could be dust in the wind. For all we know, our lives can just end next week. And the fact of the matter is that if we still have things pending on our plate, we might be at that point where we no longer can be able to embark on the things that we want to do. And again, life will always be filled with hardships. Life will be filled with ups and downs, and life will always be filled with limitations. If we continuously let limitations take control of our lives, then we cannot live lives the way that we want to live it. So even though it's hard, take a step and try to go beyond your limitations, even if it's just a little step forward. And then maybe try another step forward and another step forward until you realize that after a couple of months or after a couple of days or weeks, you could be so far from the limitations already that you are now in a completely different world altogether. And so really, with that kind of mindset, I encourage everyone to have that in their lives and to just remember that at the end of the day, you are enough. And you can be more than you can be if you believe in yourself and just take that step forward.
Wow, thank you. Beautiful message. And I value the time we spent today. I value the conversation we had, and I look forward to seeing you more in the future, hopefully.
For sure. I mean, likewise for me, I'm so honored that you would take time out of your busy schedule to just, come and have a chat with me. I appreciated our talk. This was a long overdue talk. I mean,
Yes.
we've had literally...
We haven't spoken this way ever.
Right? Yeah.
Because we always get caught up.
Yes.
Even if we meet, even if we did had that meeting
Yeah.
a year ago or so,
Yeah,
it wasn't this long or it wasn't this deep.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy spending time to chat with you on these things and, just spending time to hang out with you because, Mike, you are really, again, an amazing person. I keep on using the term, but I know you as a good friend, and I'm sure that the people around you will also agree with me when I say that you are truly a person for others. And
well, I wasn't that nice to you back in grade school.
No,
I know
no,
there
don't
were
say-
some moments I didn't treat you too well.
I mean, I think that was, I think
But that was part of, I
Yeah.
guess, growing up,
Like,
childhood. We go through that.
I was also a crazy child back then, but we let that leave us.
Set it
and
aside,
Yeah,
yeah.
we just move forward.
Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for today.
Thank you. Looking forward to more hangouts and catch-ups.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.